Good morning. I think I'm going to hand over to Curtis right away because I think Curtis has all the news for this week.
Yeah. So, hi everyone. Welcome to this week's CanJS Community Hangout. Thanks for joining. As always, we've got a couple Batovi CanJS developers here: Brian, David, Justin, Jan, Mikhail, Matthew, and myself, Curtis. So I'll start with the biggest news this week, which is the release of 2.1, which happened Monday. So let me share my screen here. There are a ton of improvements and additions to CanJS in 2.1, mostly performance-oriented. For a full list of those, we've got a release notes article posted on batovi.com. It goes through every single big feature that went out in 2.1. I'll do a quick list just in case you haven't read the article yet. So we've got a new templating language called Stash, lazy bubbling for maps and lists, lazy map and lazy list. There's a list promises plugin that just got released. The can map define plugin, can route map, can view adder, can view tag, and there's some serious work done on the documentation, including our inline documentation. We also have a new recipes guide and a plugin guide with a Yaomin generator. And along with all that stuff, we did a bunch of bug fixes. So before we continue to the next release, is there anything in 2.1 that anyone wanted to ask about or talk about specifically? This is where people who are watching can use the Q&A app to ask us questions.
Looks like we don't have any watchers yet.
Oh, great.
All right.
We'll continue to 2.1. And if there are any questions, they can ask, and we'll get back to them. So 2.1.1. This is what it looks like right now. I set the due date as next Friday. It's probably going to go out next week at the latest, right?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. We're a couple critical bugs.
Yeah, so there's a couple stash bugs, a couple documentation clarifications right now, and a couple other little bugs that people have found in 2.1. Now let's go to things that don't have a milestone. There's been a couple new bugs and pull requests added recently. So let's look at this one because I had a question about this. This is what happens if you use a function for your scope with a component. And I don't know if that is supposed to work inside of when you return it as a function, because you get the adders passed in as the first param to that function, right? Mm-hmm. So that shouldn't work. Like, that's not a use case that we want to support, right?
What do you mean you get the attributes converted?
No. So this works if you just define scope as an object, right? But in this case, he's defining it as a function, which means the first param here is your adders, and then the second param is your parent scope. So if you wanted this behavior, you just look up string on the adders that were passed in, right?
Yeah, you can definitely do it that way. But does it say you can return the? I mean, what does the documentation say?
I don't think it's clear.
You return an object that becomes a scope.
If it's a function, so that if the function signature.
Yeah, you return a map.
It does say you can return an object, so that should work probably then, actually.
Okay, so that would just be shorthand for looking up things in the adders object that gets passed in.
Yeah, like it does now. The tricky part is going to be, I don't know. That's probably something that we should fix, but at the same time, or with stash, which is going to kind of be the way we go forward. I don't know. If it's something that we can fix easily, I'm kind of worried that the order at which things kind of happen in component setup might preclude this or make this kind of unnecessarily weird to make happen. Probably, it's definitely a bug. It's something we should look to fix.
We've got a couple more. I think Brian's just clarifying some scope stuff, which I think that's easy to get in. A couple other warning when you use reserved attributes in a component. So ID and a couple other attributes are reserved. So if you try to pass values as those, it's not going to work.
There actually is documentation for that, by the way.
Yeah, he's adding a warning for it, so you get a CanDev warn. Which, if you haven't ever used Can's dev version, you should definitely use it because there's tons of really helpful hints in there, and a lot of foot guns get removed or get alerted to you when you're doing your CanJS development. So,
Matt, where did you put the documentation for that?
No, it was already documented.
Oh, okay, cool.
Okay. So,
actually, Curtis, before you move on, one thing that kind of came up recently, I think, Stan, didn't you see this when you upgraded to Piano, or Piano to 2.1, and then I think another guy was talking about it in the forums, is that the warning that was put in, that Eric put in for mustache tags that don't have, or like when you're trying to render something that doesn't exist in the data, in the scope, there's a warning that's supposed to spit out. But I think that there may be problems with that, because I think somebody implied that there was it was spitting out warnings for every helper also. So I'm not sure. I haven't looked at the code that he added, but has anyone
I haven't looked at it too deeply, but when we switched it, we're testing the most recent Apple Analytics app against 2.1. It throws about 3,000 console statements when you it throws so many console statements on a init that it actually hangs the thread for about, I don't know, a little over half a second.
okay, that's definitely not good. Yeah, so I guess we'll have to look at that and maybe, because these dev warnings were put in 927. That's the pull request. So yeah, same thing will happen with Stash and Mustache. I think the warnings were added to both engines. All right. Couple more recent ones. Mikhail. So similar to can list promises, this adds the promises for can map or can model.
Can model, not can map, because it's wrapping the find one method. It's basically replacing the find one with a wrapped version that is the compute.
Okay. So that will probably go into 2 then, because it's a feature. Okay. Any other tests or issues that you guys want to talk about for 2.1.1? That was the latest 10 or so. We have over 100. We should be cleaning up in the next week or 2.
I think, well, isn't that stash else thing pretty important? That looks like a big bug. Matthew, didn't you file that one?
Yeah. I mean, you can work around it, but Yeah, I mean, that would be nice to be fixed for sure. So if you're using else inside of an attribute string, then it just won't do anything.
But it doesn't even give you the else case. It just gives you nothing.
Yeah, I mean, even if it's truthy, it still won't. Just the presence of the else makes it break.
Wow. Okay. So if you do that, it will work. Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's definitely something we should fix. And hopefully get it for 2.1.1. Anything else that anyone wanted to bring up that we need to clarify? We can move on to 2.2 as well.
You and I talked a little bit about a better deployment mechanism to automate that. So hopefully we'll have some time to work on it, but it will be pretty cool because then you only need to tag a new version, and we're going to have nightly builds, and it's just going to be a nicer flow for releasing things. Maybe even something and you could like transfer to other projects as well.
Yeah, so let me elaborate on it's still a mad scientist's plan right now, but the idea is that we would set up a server somewhere that would, so GitHub would send us a webhook when we tagged a new release in CanJS repository, and there are a bunch of steps you have to do to deploy a release. The first step being actually build the project, but then you've got to update canjs.com. We have to update the CDN and run our doco and do a bunch of things. So it would be nice if we had a process that listened for tags and just kicked that off for us. So that's the evil plan. And I kind of have some ideas of how we're going to do that, but the key is getting some time to work on that. And like David said, if all goes well, we could actually generalize it so that you could do this for any project, and you could kind of deploy a release for like Steel or Func Unit. Like when you tag a new release, you specify what steps should happen, and it just does it for you. So yeah, that's the evil plan. So I don't have any other issues to go over. So 2.11 will probably go out Friday at the latest, next Friday at the latest. If there are no questions, I think we're done for this week.
Was there anything big in 2.2 yet?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about 2.2. What do we want to do for 2.2?
So there are a lot of things in 2.1 that we deferred to 2.2. One of them being, I guess I can talk about the DOM-less compilation because that's pretty cool. I think Justin's working on that a little bit too. That was basically a way to shim jQuery so that you didn't require a DOM to actually generate Mustache and EJS templates. So that would help us in a node environment like requires build step, where you could actually include your precompiled templates in your output from RJS. But I think, Justin, we're going to expand on that a little bit and we have greater ambitions for that, right?
Yeah, I want to make it, well, I want to have at least some officially supported plugin types for our templates for various systems that can build them. So eventually I could see it, once we have DOM-less compilation, it'll allow us to do require.js template builds the same way you can do for Steel, and to support anything else that might want that. Or just a good way of testing that to make sure that we can actually do builds in other systems with CanJS.
And taking that one step further, once you have DOM-less compilation, it's only one more step until you can actually run some CanJS stuff in a Node environment. So you could use controls and various things without a DOM, which would be interesting.
Yeah, I think model would be the most fitting thing that you would probably want. That if you could use CAN model to connect to, you could add an ORM around it and that kind of thing to support kind of Ruby on Rails-esque ORMs, which would be really nice. Another thing that you could do with it is, the define plugin in the long run, I want that to work more on, through object-defined properties. Like it would be a way to, our defines are a little bit, richer than what you can do with object-defined property, but then also not quite as rich in some other ways. But I think it'd be really cool to have a define plugin that can work on normal objects as well as kind of can map in the long run, and then be able to use that in Node as well. It would probably be very advantageous. Oh, and to be able to render our views, right? You could render a mustache template, but you will never be able to render stash, though, server-side without a DOM.
Yeah, because that's just a document fragment floating around that you then populate, right?
Okay. So, but what other things would people like to see in 2.2? I kind of want to. What should our priorities be?
I don't know about priority, but that thing we talked about, the way to I don't know if I actually like this, but to make computes have errors. Remember we talked about that, or some way to handle that situation.
Yeah, that came up because of this. Because your setter wasn't passing, right?
Yeah, because my setter returned the old value, so they become out the values become out of sync. So there could be you could either create something that like a custom attribute that keeps them in sync. You could do that, but we were talking about a higher level way to signal that a compute rejected the setter, basically.
Yeah.
And I think that would extend to maps. Well, basically, a nice way to handle errors all around, I think.
Yeah.
By the way, Justin, kind of related to this, the plan to make computes object-oriented, is that out the window? Is that not perform it?
Yeah, it doesn't perform. I mean, I wrote a version that was object-oriented, and it performed 10-15% worse. And computes are the core central part of live binding, so that was kind of unacceptable. I mean, the code is much cleaner now. The async computes added some more complexity to it. I mean, I think it just needs more to clean up, but I think the functional style and closure-based style of it just has to persist for performance reasons. But I think in terms of the error plugins, I think the error stuff in CanMap, how it works, hit all the points that it needs to. I just think we should be looking to integrate that with the define plugin, so you can define error behavior in the same way you define getter setters and things like that. And then we should make sure that works well with what we do for computes. What else would you guys like to see done? I gotta imagine that Matt and Kyle though also want to see the select attribute working on the content element.
Yes, absolutely.
I think that's in terms of what if 2.1 was really a performance release, I would like to see that 2.2 is the release that really gets web components right. I would like to see the select tag working, and I would like to see that you can embed the components in the page, and it works.
I thought that was a 3.0 kind of feature.
No, we can do it in We can do it without breaking changes.
So I was going to ask about that. What is involved in that? What do we have to change to make that possible?
So a lot depends on like how smart we are. If we don't want to be very smart, we can do it really easily. Just like do inner HTML on the body, pass that to CanStash, and then just take that back and put it in the body. Okay? If we want to be smarter, we will take we'll process the actual DOM nodes and put them into target, that layer that Stash uses that like can clone fragments and things like that. Because we'll take them because if there's any, let's say, existing event handlers or existing like modifications to the actual elements, especially event handlers, like someone added a jQuery UI widget before CanJS got itself going. If we got the raw elements and put them in and kind of like coordinated with Stash to get them inside target the right way, then I've heard that, like, I don't know if it's still true, but I've heard a lot of complaints about Angular is just that like it basically takes over your page and you have to do everything like within Angular. If we did it this way, cloning fragments and things like that, we could at least make it so that if you added other things outside of it, it works with that. And I think that's probably a good target. Whether we need to do that for 2.1, like for 2.1 and 2.0, like to me, if we don't go all the way, then we have to like make it so people call like some method like components start when all their components are loaded, like your components are ready, that will force it to go through the DOM and just kind of do this replace of the body's contents. Right? But if we go all the way, we really can just drop it in the page, because then we wouldn't be like breaking, we wouldn't be really breaking anybody's apps if they did some kind of initial setup to their page, because we really wouldn't be like breaking whatever else they had set up. But yeah, I would like to see that. Right? I think that would be a big win for us.
So it sounds like Stash gives us that almost already, because Stash is built on DOM nodes. But if you already have the DOM nodes, you just run it through Target and then hook it up.
Yeah, you got to get them into Target in the right way. So there's still a lot of process. I mean, you're still gonna have to like go through every element and like kind of figure out where the mustache parts are and the special attributes. There's another problem to it, is that if we want to support IE8, what we need is so that, what would be good is a way for people to automate somehow a stub for IE8. Because what you need for IE8 is, let's say you were bottom loading all your tags. Bottom loading all your JavaScript. In IE8, any special attribute is just going to be thrown away in IE8, because by the time you load CanJS and HTML5 shiv and load all your components at the bottom of the page, it's too late. All those elements are going to be kind of ignored by IE8. So what you need to do is you need to have like a little shim at the top of little script file, or a little shim you can put at the top of for IE8 that just simply loads HTML5 shiv and then defines all of your custom attributes for your whole application. So that then later, when you bottom load your page, all of that can be loaded. So we need to also figure that out, so that some way of easily exporting people, like, oh, you need a shiv for all your scripts, maybe for require.js or for Steel or for something else, like, hey, here's like a script you can run that will load the app, see all the components that you're loading, their tags, maybe parse out the tags even, I don't know, and just dump that somewhere. If we want to still support IE8, I think we should. Or maybe we just say this kind of thing you can't do. If you want to support IE8, you still got to use the old way of like drawing the page yourself.
That might not be a bad thing. I mean, IE8 support is still important, but that really nice feature, we could make it. I mean, if it takes that much more work to make IE 8 work? It sounds pretty hacky.
Yeah. So what else was on our roadmap?
What about the
I still.
the dirty checking? Is it any progress been made on that?
Jan?
I think we should probably talk about that next week, Justin, with you.
Next week, Friday, maybe.
Yeah.
As you know,
Yeah.
until Thursday is a busy time
Yeah, right.
for me. I don't know. I don't know what their progress is. Probably not much.
What about
Yeah,
you
not
said,
a lot.
But maybe after Thursday we'll have maybe.
That sounds great.
So what about if we have web components with if we have web components within the page with 2.2, does that mean we have a new templating language as well, a HTML-based templating language? That's got to come with it, right?
Well, it would still. It would just be like HTML stash, right? Basically, like what I would like to do is you can can stash a element, or like a template element, or just like an element in like the body, or you can pass stash a string. And either way, it kind of runs through its. Either way, it kind of does its business, and ideally,
but there's some
what we
stuff
could
you
do.
can't.
Go ahead.
There's some stuff you
Matt?
can't do with just stash. You can't attributes. You can't do all that.
What do you mean?
Like
If you're
within
talking
the
about
page, you
syntactically,
can't put like if and then
you can. So Matt, Josh Marchand experimented with this, and
You lose them?
I think so.
Okay, I was going to say, is it just me or?
yeah.
Although Hangout did freeze his face nicely. All right. Well, until he comes back, is there something
Yeah,
else?
ES6 modules. Would it be a 3.0 feature or 2.2? Because if you make a build that still supports all the original package managers, it could be a 2.2 feature, but it might more likely be a 3.0 feature.
Hey, Justin.
you guys can see me now.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, you're good.
Matt, what I was saying was Josh Marchand. He thinks you can actually have a template in the page and make it work. Like, and you just have to process the HTML a little weird, but it should maintain, like, even weird attribute stuff should work. I don't know though. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'd love to see how, because I've tried this, I've played around with this, and like that stuff goes away. But maybe I don't know.
Okay, that's good. Like, me, you, and him should have a talk because he's worked on convincing me that it's possible, and I had reservations, but he did show a few places where it works. Yeah, basically all we have to do is, so Mustache has an internal parser, or Stash has an internal parser that it uses. We would just use, instead of a string parser, basically an HTML parser that would call back the same kind of stuff. So it should be possible to work. I don't know.
So David was mentioning
so
ES6 modules.
was mentioning what?
ES6 modules, and whether that would be a 2.2 or 3.0.
We'll be able to export to whatever we want to. Yeah, we can do that actually. Probably, well, unless we consider people who clone from GitHub, do we consider that our API? If we do, then we cannot do it until 3.0. If we don't, then actually we probably can't do it until 3.0 because I know there's like a bunch of people who use submodules for CanJS in their projects.
And with the libraries in the repository, there's a whole bunch of things that will break because we would take those out as well and just make it all Bower or npm dependent. But okay, yeah, 3.0 it is.
Okay. So on our thing, then there's like supermodel, you know, and the can connect idea. I'd still love to do that. I'm hoping that, you know, if David ever has some time, that you can make a really cool feathers and someone else, and like I know McLeod was working on a little bit, but you know, you could make a very cool feathers and supermodel. That's in the
make like a full stack framework. Make it a full stack framework kind of thing. That would be kind of nice. Be able to sell it. Hey, this is better than Meteor because it's working on proven technology.
Yeah. One deferreds and computes. That was just. I think we should make it so you can observe deferreds. Is the big thing, right? So we kind of already have that now with the lazy list, but I think it would just be better to make our observables or deferreds observable. So the template when the deferred resolves just updates itself, and I think deferreds will just have a reason attribute for failure, for rejection, and a value for when it's resolved property that you can just like use in your template. You can do deferred.value in your template, and when that thing is resolved, will just show up. That's actually probably pretty easy to do, except to make it work in all other libraries might be a little hairy. We might need to use our own deferred. Any other things that people really want to see done? And comments on priority. In my opinion, priority is the component stuff for 2.2.
Remember with the project we're working on now, how we return like full HTML, and then CanView goes through and like replaces everything. It'd be really cool if there was a way for Can to know that this element is fully formed, and I don't have to wipe it out and reprocess it if that was possible.
Yeah, that's really hard. I don't know how.
Yeah.
Like I've thought about that. Like you with can model that it would load the data and stuff like that, and somehow like. But the problem is you're still gonna have to go in and get your event handlers all in place. Like somehow you're gonna have to know, well, this list has already been rendered, so the view will like go and get those elements, but not actually like redraw them. I mean, that's more of something someone has to like think about how it's going to work for like 4 months.
Yeah.
Kind of the same way that I think we're getting closer now to a way to do, you know, the select attribute. You got to think about it for a long time. Yeah, that'd be right in line with the same component stuff. It's like, how do we make components work? Oh, another thing that I just talked about today would be animations. We're kind of a first-class citizen of templates, so that you everything inside this if, I want to fade in when the if becomes truthy or falsy, right? When you add a list item, it fades in or fades out, or be able to like add some behavior for when you kind of add or remove things to an element. That would be really nice. Anything? All right.
I guess that's it for this week. No one's got anything else?
So everybody,
Nope.
everybody thinks that the component thing is the right thing to do for 2.2.
I think so.
About that? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that will
Cool. Sorry.
put us more in line with Angular, and we can talk about how the difference is a little bit more easily after that.
Yeah, I'm a fan. I mean, we would be like the first framework, other than I guess Polymer, that has that. I talked to the HTML5 Rocks guys, and they were in favor of us doing an article like when we have all of that functionality in place. So I think that'd be cool.
So you can't do that with Angular, right? You can't.
I don't think so.
You can.
It doesn't call register element, does it?
No, no, it doesn't.
No, it's not a real web component.
I think you have to use Polymer with Angular, don't you? If you want that.
I don't think you can use them together.
No, you cannot.
Ours won't call register element, but it will. I mean, it might. That's another thing that Josh Marchen has talked about, is allowing you to actually write, use the constructors. Use the components prototype methods and put those directly on an element. And then for browsers that do support register element, we would actually register, the element behavior, the prototype, the component. But for ones that don't, we'll find them and actually just like add every method on the object when we find it. So it'll be slower, but will still work for older browsers. That'd be nice.
So the difference is with Angular, you get like an Angular component that just works with an Angular, but this would be a component that could work without CAN, potentially.
Only browsers that support register element.
Right, but it would be a true web component in that sense.
More or less. I mean, part of the problem is. Part of the issue is going to be how, like, web components don't really deal with scope or like templates. Like, I know Polymer has their model-driven views, but they don't like define any way. So like, hey, how do I look up a property in some kind of value, in my template or scope somewhere? So if you made a CanJS web component or Can component that only was only reading from your direct attribute properties, it wasn't like trying to read things up in the scope, then yes, it would work, right? So that would be good for your like tabs and things like that, your basic widgety kind of things, but it wouldn't be great for your your higher level orchestration of your page, where you're connecting this person to be able to be created in your person form and this person show view and things like that. We've got to pass this person object around. It would not be good for that because there's no way. I know, other than just calling, like you'd have to manually go to the element and call like some method or set some property with the person object that you wanted it to have. But yes, it would be close. It would be close to real web components, but until that happens, it's like we wouldn't integrate well with anything big, but integrate well with only like the little widgets would integrate well.
So really the benefit of this would be for like people building reusable small widgets, but for people building like full CanJS apps, what would be the benefit to them?
The benefit would be, well, there would be a few, I mean, for using register element versus what we do now.
For being able to write widgets that are run from HTML versus the way that works now.
Well, you can do things with jQuery you couldn't do before. Like the advantage is those small widgets, really. That's the advantage. So if they're using a tabs, well, they can create a tabs element with jQuery and append that to their document, and it will just work, right? It's more like low-level widgets will find a lot of use out of it, but higher-order ones will probably not.
Yeah.
But performance will be faster because we won't have to be like, setting up callbacks for every custom element. We'll get a callback called for us when that element is added to the doc.
Yeah, it'll be in the browser. Yeah.
Yeah. Which reminds me, Matt, for your mutation observer stuff, it'd be ideal if you can have a synchronous versus an asynchronous flag that we can set for the removed and destroyed kind of stuff. I don't know if that's possible.
What do you mean
Probably
by
isn't actually.
about making what synchronous? The mutation? Mutation fine?
Yeah.
Well, there's tape records.
So, yes, there are tape records. I guess we could. Maybe that would work. Well, basically, if you want to make what you're doing, so it's one interesting thing is this 2.2 might actually, if we want to make all of the component stuff work, we might have to make it 3.0 because we would have, right now the removed and inserted events happen synchronously, but if we started using your mutation observer stuff, they would happen end of turn. So that would be a breaking change, which probably wouldn't affect people, but it still would be breaking change. Maybe a compromise is we still keep inserted and removed synchronous. If you listen to inserted and remove, you still use kind of the old code, but if you listen to any other type of mutation event, you use your system. Maybe.
Yeah. I mean, the only problem with trying to add extra APIs onto that is then you're not going to be able to use the native mutation observers.
Yeah, which is the whole point. The nice performance benefit that it gets you.
Okay. Anything else?
Sounds good for today.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, I think we're done. Yeah, we'll do this again next week.
Awesome.
See